Hey, I'm Hannah. My short story collection, Little Birds, is available in ebook, paperback, signed paperback, and now audiobook. All the links are in the description. I don't know why I talk so fast in my intro. I could just speak at a regular pace. Hi, I'm Hannah. My short story collection, Little Birds, is available in ebook and paperback and signed paperback and audiobook. Whatever you'd like. The links are in the description. This is a small animal skull. I forgot what kind. Whatever creature it belonged to. Died in an old barn. People send me writing questions all the time. That's where I get a lot of my video topic ideas. One of the most common topics that people ask me about is character description. So what do you include when you're physically describing someone? And when do you describe it? And what do you leave out? And how soon is too soon? And how do you naturally include like a POV character's description? Should you have them wake up in the morning and then look in the mirror? No, you shouldn't do that. I have 4 general guidelines for writing physical description, and then we're going to look at an example from one of my patrons, and I'm going to live edit it for you guys to see how these guidelines might apply to a real story. If you need some extra writing help, I have several offerings for critiques and workshops both on my services page and on my Patreon page as perks, so they're a little more affordable, and you get all the other perks that come with pledging on Patreon. I'll drop all those links in the description if you want to check it out. So these are 4 general tips for writing character description, and then I have like an extra hack that I use to write description. Tip number 1, try to be original with your prose. Avoid cliches. Those are annoying and boring to read. Some examples of cliches you might see in a physical description are like raven locks or sky eyes or ocean eyes or starry eyes. The mirror thing has been done to death where a character like wakes up and looks in the mirror and evaluates their own appearance for no reason. It's just lazy and people are tired of reading it. So it does take a little bit of extra work and consideration, but instead of just describing your character with the first thing that comes to mind, take some time to craft the language around it. Tip 2 is to spread out your description a little bit. This can really help with pacing. So give us the basic description of your character right away, and then give us more stuff later as it becomes relevant. So enough to follow along, but not too much that your reader gets bogged down with a lot of details that they're then going to forget. If you watch my video on writing scene descriptions, you're going to see that a lot of the advice is the same. It's just including enough detail that your reader understands what's going on, spreading it out in a reasonable way so you don't mess up the pacing of your scene, and making what you do include really well crafted. That's going to be the same for any description that you're writing, whether it's a physical description or a scene description. So the basic things that we might get as soon as we're introduced to a character might include their general shape, if they're tall, short, fat, thin, their rough age, their skin color, their hair color, and maybe their eye color. Eye color is something you could save for later, especially if it's a character that your MC is just meeting, because not everyone notices eye color immediately. That's something that you might notice later. Some other description that you might save for a little bit later might be like the pitch of their voice, maybe the kind of clothes that they're wearing, scars, twitches, like mannerisms. And I don't mean that you have to take one character description and spread it throughout the entire book. Okay, for example, say your MC meets a character, and in the paragraph that character is introduced, we get their general shape, skin tone, maybe any glaringly obvious things that we notice about their mannerisms or the way that they're dressed. And then the characters could walk outside, and when they're in the sunlight, your MC notices the color of their eyes because it's brighter and they can see better. Maybe the way that their face reacts to the bright light and like things like that. You don't have to drop 4 or 5 paragraphs of description about a character immediately. That's just not interesting to read, especially if it's a character we don't care about yet. Like your reader's not invested enough to not skim. So spacing it out can keep it interesting, and it really helps with pacing. Tip 3, use it to characterize. Make your description work double duty. Don't just use it to help the reader picture what's there, use it to help the reader understand the character. Some relevant details that could characterize might be the state and quality of a person's clothes or how neat their hair is. Maybe they have like scars or calluses from something specific that would tell us something about them. If their roots are grown out, maybe they don't care that much or they've been really busy lately. Gotcha. If their fingers are chewed up, maybe they're anxious. If they're dressing in really baggy clothes, maybe they're insecure, or maybe they hate attention. So there are assumptions that we can make based on how you describe people. So think about what your descriptions are saying about your character. And my favorite advice for every aspect of any kind of writing is to keep POV in mind. So if we're seeing another character through our POV character's eyes, what we see should be filtered through their own opinions and their relationship to that character. Along with that, try to keep the character's voice in it. I just spilled water in my lap. Like, how would they describe that person? They're going to describe them differently based on how close they are to them, if they like them or not, if they're attracted to them. So not only does the way that you write physical description characterize the person you're describing, it characterizes the person who's describing them. And it can show your reader things about the dynamic between those characters. And my bonus tip for when I'm writing physical description is when I'm in a close POV, I like to include my MC's description as I describe others. For example, in Cane Sprouts, whenever the cousin's introduced, she describes him, and she says that like his eyes wrinkle when he smiles. She says it's a family trait, and then she describes the color of his eyes and says they're a little bit darker than hers. So we learned the MC's eye color and that her face crinkles when she smiles. But we didn't actually get her describing herself because that would have been awkward and there wouldn't have really been a place to put that in. But she's observing it in another character and is like a family member she hasn't seen in a while, so she's like remembering all their similarities. So that's one way that you can naturally work in your POV character's physical description whenever you're like in first person or just in a close perspective. Now we're gonna look at a scene from my patron Christian. If you want me to edit your scenes in a video, go to patreon.com/HannahLeeKidder. If you haven't seen one of my editing videos before, I try to keep to the original scene as much as I can without adding or cutting too much. I try to just tweak it and like rearrange what's already there. So yeah, let's get to it. Monica. Monica leaned on the column of her porch reading a newspaper. Crickets chirped in the storm drain in front of her house. The sun was expiring. The crickets muted. Monica glanced toward the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk. An enormous man in black swayed with each step, hunched with his arm at his chest, a blood-soaked arm. He stopped and sat on the cement. He leaned against the chain-link fence of her yard. His arm remained at his abdomen. She tossed a newspaper on a table and ran to him. She examined him from a few feet away. He struggled to breath. His wrinkled face and red close-cropped hair beaded with sweat. He wore a thin beard. Bits of gravel stuck to his dark-skinned cheeks as if he had fallen on his face. Behind his crooked spectacles were glassy brown eyes. The lapel on his shirt read Officer Richardson. He coughed dryly. Monica called 911 on her cell phone and ran into the house. She returned with a glass of water and a towel. She lifted his arm carefully and pressed the towel on the stab wound. She offered him the water. He nodded, and she tipped the glass to his lips. The tribal tattoo on his neck that peeked from his collar bobbed as he drank. He finished the water and smiled. The wail of sirens in the distance started. His head slumped to his breathless chest. Okay, the main problems I see with this are the pacing. So the way that the sentences are arranged and the order in which things happen make it read a little bit awkward. There are also some repetitive sentence structure, so like short sentence, short sentence, short sentence. One of Christian's writer quirks are these random sentence fragments. So we'll fix those. All right, let's see what we can do. I like the crickets chirping in the storm drain. I think that would work better at the beginning to kind of settle us into a setting and then see Monica. This sentence isn't really doing it for me, so we could do like crickets chirped, something like that. He leaned on the column of her porch reading a newspaper. We could just get a little more specific. I don't know anything about her, but we could say which section of the newspaper she's reading. I'll just put the Sunday paper. Something about the Sunday paper gives it like because it's the weekend, so she's chilling, and then she sees a guy dying. It makes it a little more dramatic. I might take out we don't know anything about what she looks like. Something that's easy to describe about our POV character is hair whenever they have long hair. So we could say something like, she chewed the inside of her cheek and turned the page, shaking a strand of dark hair from her face. This gives us a hair color and also just like an action she's doing, which humanizes her a little bit. The crickets muted. I really like that word there. Glanced toward the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk. I think I'm going to put Monica glanced up. From the street, I don't think that she'd know it was the sidewalk until she looked up. But an enormous man isn't very descriptive. So we could say, like if we said towering, that makes him tall. Enormous could mean several things. I'm going to say dressed in black, just to clear that up. Since we took out sidewalk earlier, I'll put that back here. Swayed on the sidewalk, hunching over a blood-soaked arm. Like blood-soaked arm is dramatic enough without repeating it, you know? Hunching over his blood-soaked arm because he's not like holding a severed one. And sat on the cement. It's concrete. If you describe a character as stopping, it's almost always unnecessary because if he's sitting, like, yeah, he stopped. And sat is also not very descriptive. Can you hear my dog pacing around? Sai, can you lay down? Thank you. So we could say he slumped to a seat on the concrete, leaning against her chain link fence. I think that's hyphenated. Christian, do you just hit tab 17 times to start a new paragraph? What are you doing, buddy? Copy this so we have our accent O. Monica. Tossed is kind of casual, so I'm going to just say dropped the paper. Also on the table makes it seem like she's taking the time to do it. Monica dropped the paper and ran to him. That's a lot quicker, so that fixes that pacing issue, because the way that it was, it looked like she was just standing there watching him for a while, and it's like, if you see a man that's dying, you're probably going to have some pep in your step, hopefully. She examined him from a few feet away. This is also like, we don't need it. He struggled to breathe. I think I'm just going to go straight into a description. His wrinkled face. I'm going to take out red just because I don't know what this man looks like. We'll leave him dark-skinned and take out the red. I don't know if he's missing the word was or if he's using beaded as a verb. He's probably missing the word was, but I like that as a verb. We'll leave it. He wore a thin beard. I'm going to put bits of gravel stuck to his dark-skinned cheek and thin beard. As if he had fallen on his face isn't necessary. Why else would he have gravel on his face? Yeah, he has skin. Dark cheeks. Thin is kind of a lackluster word. We could say patchy or something like that. Or like 2-day-old beard or something. Find his crooked spectacles were glassy brown eyes.
Crooked spectacles.
Magnify. Just some stronger verbs. Oh, magnified. Switching tenses on you there. Sorry. Sir Richardson. He coughed dryly. I'm going to take that off. Christian, these tabs. Okay, Monica called 911 on her cell phone and ran into her house. Well, yeah, it's on her cell phone. She gonna scream it? And I also think I'm gonna do Monica ran into her house and called 911. I might put called for an ambulance as well. She returned. I don't like return, so just like hurried back isn't super strong, but it's better than returned. I think I'm just gonna put it against. How does she know it's a stab wound? I don't think she does. Yeah, since towel's the last thing we said, I think we know that it is towel. Held up the water. That's also not super strong, but this is just a lot of little tiny sentences, so I'll just mix them up.
She held up the water, and he nodded as she took the glass to his lips. Oh, God.
Tribal tattoo on his neck that peeked from his collar, bobbed as he drank. No, I don't think we need peeked from his collar, actually. Neck bobbed as he drank. Swallowed? He finished the water and smiled. The wails of sirens in the distance started. His head slumped to his breathless chest. Okay, I feel like this is supposed to be a lot more urgent than it is. And like he finished the water and smiled is kind of encouraging and chill. I think we're supposed to be worried about him. So he sputtered and pushed it away. Then smiled soft. Anytime you're saying something started or began, it's probably unnecessary. You can just say, sirens wailed in the distance. Which, like, in and of itself is a little cliche. That's a really common phrase, but it's better. Sirens wail in the distance. We could say, as his head slumped to his breathless chest. She's not, like, checking his breathing. That'd be hard to spot. Sirens wailed in the distance as, instead of his, I'm going to go ahead and put Officer Richardson's. Naming him makes it a little more dramatic, I feel. Quieted. Since we used slumped up here, I'm going to put dropped there. If we're also being introduced to her in this scene, I would want to know at least like her skin color and maybe something about her build. And unless it makes sense for this character, Monica, not to be speaking, I would add dialogue in this. It makes sense for him not to talk because he's like, dying, but it's really weird that she doesn't say anything unless there's a reason for that I don't see in this scene. Crickets chirped to the setting sun from storm drains. Monica leaned on the column of her porch, reading the Sunday paper. I make that a column. Do porches just have one column? I don't know. She chewed the inside of her cheek and turned the page, shaking a strand of dark hair from her face. The crickets quieted. Monica glanced up at the sound of footsteps echoing from the street. A towering man dressed in black swayed on the sidewalk, hunching over his blood-soaked arm. He slumped to his seat on the concrete, leaning against her chain-link fence. Monica dropped the paper and ran to him. His wrinkled face and close-cropped hair beaded with sweat. Bits of gravel stuck to his dark cheeks and patchy beard. Crooked spectacles magnified glassy brown eyes. The lapel on his shirt read Officer Richardson. These sentences are really repetitive and just like, this did this and this did this. So like right here, I might add an action of something he's doing just to break that up. She hurried back with a glass of water and a towel. She lifted his arm carefully and pressed it against the wound. She held up the water and he nodded as she tipped the glass to his lips. This is a lot of repetition of sentences that start with she. We could put this here and then change this back to towel. Monica dropped the paper and ran to him. His wrinkled face and close-cropped hair beaded with sweat. The lapel on his shirt read Officer Richardson. She ran into her house and called for an ambulance. Then, that kind of breaks up the she stuff. She ran into her house and called for an ambulance, then hurried back with a glass of water and a towel. Or we could also do crooked spectacles, magnifying, glassy brown eyes. And then here maybe put a metaphor, magnifying, glassy brown eyes, like insert helpless animal here. I don't know. That's an option. Bits of gravel stuck to his dark cheeks and patchy beard, crooked spectacles, magnifying glassy brown eyes. She lifted his arm carefully and pressed the towel against. So I think that reads a lot easier and clearer, and the pacing is a little bit better. That's all I got for you. Hope it was helpful. Thanks for watching, and thank you to my patrons for sponsoring this video. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe, wash your hands, be nice to animals, hit the notification bell if you want to be alerted every time I upload, which is like every Thursday. I'm fully committed to my outros. See you next week. Bye.